European colonization, of course, plays a huge part in the beginnings of American literature, and we're going to look at literature that comes out of three different kinds of settlement. The first is the individual investor adventure model, and that's typified mainly by the Spanish conquistadors. We're going to read Cabeza de Vaca, and he was part of a particular conquistador's expedition, Panfilo de Narvaez, whose exploration did not work out so well, and shipwrecked de Vaca and his friends. But the conquistador model is somewhat government sanctioned. That is, it's unofficially supported by the government. The government isn't necessarily giving them a lot of support, but it's basically saying you can operate and do these things, and as long as you give back to the crown, as long as you give back to your betters, it's okay for you to do this under some sort of unofficial sanction. So basically, don't break any treaties, don't start any wars, but we'll let you sort of roam and ramble in your areas, such as the way the Spanish do in Mexico and the western U.S. Unfortunately, it proves to be kind of a shaky model, at least for the English. It doesn't work out so well. A more successful model somewhat is that of the chartered corporation, which the Virginia Company, which John Smith was a part of, is an example of that. In that particular model, you have multiple investors and shareholders, and the people that come as settlers are somehow invested in what's going on monetarily, or they've traded their work and labor and become indentured servants to get over there to be able to share in the profits of what they encounter. It's informed by, of course, the experiences in Roanoke and the writing of Thomas Harriot, which we're going to look at. Their goal is economic. They want to make money. They think they're going to find the mother lode of gold like the Spanish did. Of course, they're greatly mistaken in Virginia. The settlers, unfortunately, are not prepared and not suited for the environment that they find themselves in. They are typically the second and third sons, and this is all men at the beginning, the second and third sons of families, that didn't inherit, aren't going to inherit from their fathers. They have to find another way to make it in the world. And a lot of them are sort of, they're not used to hard work. Let's put it that way. Actually, the only one of the initial crew that's really prepared is Captain John Smith, which is one of the reasons why he sort of takes over. And those companies, the charter corporations, are governed by their board of directors, basically. They have sort of the chairman of the board of directors that sends down the rules and governs from afar and sends orders by ship back to the colony. So that makes things a little bit harder to manage for the folks there, because things can be overturned. The way things have been established, you get your orders, you establish what's going on there, and then 6 months later you get new orders that basically dispute or put someone else in charge without any sort of really reaction to what's going on. So that can lead to a lot of confusion, and it can lead to a lot of mismanagement, as it does in the Virginia colony, as we can see from the writing of John Smith. The most successful model of settlement is that of the chartered colony with a religious purpose. The chartered colony, of course, they get their charter from the king, and they're allowed to settle in a particular geographical region, just like the Virginia colonists were. But typically, in the case of the Plymouth colony and in the case of Massachusetts Bay, they're doing it not just to make money. They're doing it because they have a religious goal in mind, that they want to live their lives and worship the way that they want to worship. And in these particular cases, the King of England thinks it's worthwhile to get rid of them because religious diversity can lead to political problems, as it soon does with the Glorious Revolution in England. He didn't get rid of enough Puritans, and he ends up getting his head chopped off. So he allows them to come over and sort of set up their own semi-autonomous governments. I mean, they're still responsible to the king. They still have, an actual charter which requires certain things as far as the governance goes. But for the most part, they're somewhat autonomous, and they remain that way until really near the end of the 17th century and after the Glorious Revolution. We got Plymouth Colony in 1620. That's the Pilgrims. The Massachusetts Bay Colony, which is the larger group of Puritans. Their shareholders, if you will, are church members. They are people who belong to that church, belong to that community. They have a financial obligation to what's going on there. They've given their money and their livelihood to make this a success, but they also have put their heart and soul into it as well for this to succeed. They're informed by the writing and experiences of people like John Smith, who John Smith in some of his writings sort of lays out what would make a successful colony. And really, in a lot of ways, what he writes about his own experiences in Virginia and the Jamestown colony is sort of a cautionary tale for what can go wrong and why it did go wrong. And they're also, for the most part, at least the initial group is pretty much hand-chosen. They are church members, and then the people who are not church members are people with specific skills. They're farmers, they are blacksmiths, they are teachers, they are tailors, coopers. I mean, all the people that have these trades that they know that they need to be able to survive and succeed in the New World. And since the Puritans and Pilgrims didn't have, necessarily all these trades and skills and abilities in their own group, they would allow people to come along and say, if you work for so long for us, then you'll have your own share in the colony. So they pick people that fit a goal, which is the goal is survival. And as I said, they're somewhat self-governed. They elect their own governors. They have a civil government. It's not a church government. They have, of course, churches with pastors, etc. And the civil government and the church government are pretty close together in a lot of ways, but they think it's very important to have a separation between church and state, and that comes out of their experiences in England, where the king is also the head of the church, and they don't like that, of course, because they want to worship differently. They don't want to follow the Church of England's rules and regulations and policies, and they don't believe they don't have the same interpretation of the Gospels that the Church of England does. And so they see that it's dangerous to have, one government which is both secular and religious. They think it's important to have a civil government and then also have churches. So John Winthrop, who's the governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, is not a pastor. He's the governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Now, looking back a little bit and looking forward both at the same time, the first literature, when we say what's the first American literature, it's literature of exploration. A lot of it's Spanish literature. In the anthology that you have, there's other literature that comes before Cabeza de Vaca. There's Columbus. There's a few other folks. But what I like to focus on are the pieces that really have resonance through the entirety of American literature and sort of set up themes and, in some ways, genres that are carried through. And those are narratives of exploration and captivity. In some ways, they're narratives of conversion as well. You could say with Cabeza de Vaca that he becomes a new person through his experience. They're descriptions, in some cases, designed to promote colonization. I mean, Thomas Harriot is basically writing a sales pitch for why you should come to the New World. And why you shouldn't be scared to come. And John Smith is writing a sales pitch that's maybe more of a warning as well, is that you need to come and you can do really well, but you need to come prepared. What they write is designed to appeal to European curiosity, and so they make sure and focus on the strangeness of what's going on there. there's a certain amount of myth building as well, of sort of larger than lifeness in what's happening. Even though Devaka says, I'm telling things plainly, and I'm actually in some ways maybe downplaying some of the fantastic things that happen, they're building new myths. They're building myths of the noble savage. They're building the romantic myths of, Pocahontas and the New American Man. And so we're going to read a lot of these new myths in our first literature, and I hope you enjoy it.